Hey everybody, Wes here, one of the student pastors at CCOF. So glad you're here. And if you missed Garrett Shelp's Instagram story earlier today, we have finished our Trinity sessions. That's right, 40 full sessions. And if you completed those, great job. Give yourself a round of applause because that is a big deal. You have invested more in your faith and following Jesus than I did at any 40-day stretch before the age of 25. I mean, you guys are doing hero stuff, and we are so proud of you. If you're still working through it, no big deal. Keep grinding. We're going to start today a new conversation we're calling Popular, and we're taking a look at all the ways that Jesus wants to leverage your influence to help you help others follow him. Now, here's how this is going to work. It's going to be a little bit different than Trinity sessions have been. On Monday, you'll check in right here, and we're going to talk a little bit about the concept, about the topic. We'll break down some scripture for you, some Bible passages. And then on Tuesday, again, right back here for the week's Trinity practice, just one a week, we'll give you something to do either on your own or with your Trinity group that can help you engage spiritually with God. On Wednesday, real simple, you'll just we'll post some discussion questions for you and your Trinity group on FaceTime or whatever your parents or local legislation allows. On Thursday, we're going to have a story time. It'll be one of us or somebody you know talking about how the concept has changed their life. And on Friday, we're doing what we're calling the deep dive. That's where we take a little deeper look into the concepts, external resources, other learnings we have, other experiences, and so that for those of you who are ready to go a little bit to a little bit higher level on things, we got you. Don't worry. With that in mind, let's begin episode 1 of Popular. Now, question, who is the most famous person on earth? Seriously, in the comments below, drop the name of who you think is the most famous person on earth. No, but seriously, do it. Who do you think it is? Some people have said Elvis. Some people have said Michael Jordan, LeBron James, or I guess JoJo Siwa if you're 9. And while we can argue about who is popular and what makes them popular, what really isn't up for debate is that popular people have influence. Now, influence is the ability to affect somebody's behavior, thinking, or choices. Influence is the ability to affect someone's behavior, thinking, or choices. Now, here's the crazy thing, is that it's not just popular people who have influence. In fact, we believe that God has given you some level of influence as well. That's right, you have influence too. But before you check out on me, I understand that this isn't so simple. Many of us are I don't really have influence. Wes, I don't have that ability. I don't have that pull with anybody. Or some of us, we are quite popular and we're man, the pressure is too much. I don't even want to play this game anymore. Some of us are afraid to try and grow influence or step into somebody's life because we're afraid to fail or hurt somebody or be seen a certain way. Some of us just really haven't even thought about it at all. But the truth is, Jesus wants to use what you already have. I was in 8th grade, and my 8th grade teacher pulled me aside one day. He had noticed how at lunch I'd played basketball, and I got pretty competitive and rough. And he said, "Hey Wes, I've noticed that you get really competitive. And actually, I love that you love to win, Wes. But what you may not see is that you're running people over in the process of winning." And by that, he meant literally, I would sometimes run people over. And I'm so glad that he had that conversation with me because I knew that he cared about me. He had influence in my life, and he had the ability to change the way I thought about playing games at lunch. Influence really matters. There's this great story about Jesus and this little boy. It's in John chapter 6, verses 8 through 14. You can read it there, but what it says is that Jesus is out teaching people, and he's gathered quite a large crowd. In fact, it says 5,000 men. Now, in those days, they just counted the men. But what that probably means is they didn't count the women and children. So there was probably somewhere between like 8 and 15,000 people total, including men, women, and children. And so there's all these huge amounts of people, and they've been listening to Jesus all day, and they're just enthralled with what he's hearing. But all of a sudden, Jesus starts to be interested in not just like teaching them, but also in feeding them. The problem is they had zero food, sir. And so Jesus was like, hey, see if anybody has some lunch. And Simon Peter speaks up. And he's like, hey, there's this little boy with a couple of loaves of bread and a couple fish. I love this moment because Peter's like, the best we have is like 7 food items. There are 15,000 people, Jesus, but I think this is kind of silly, but I'll bring it to you anyways. You know, like if it was me, I'm like totally blowing that kid off. Like, thanks, buddy. You just eat your snack. You know, like eat your snack, take a nap. Well, Jesus takes it and he blesses it. He gives thanks for it. He prays over it. And then he tells the disciples to distribute it. And they start giving it out. And all of a sudden, like, they have like food for everybody. They don't know where it's coming from. Jesus just multiplies enough food for everybody in the crowd to eat. And Jesus gives them instructions further. He says, make sure everybody has had enough. And it says, when everybody has had enough to eat, all, 8 to 15,000 people, it says they had 12 baskets left over. And here's what I think is interesting about this story, particularly when we start to talk about influence for you and I. There was a small boy with a couple of loaves and a few fish. And what he had really did not look like much. But Jesus was not concerned with what he had. Jesus was more concerned with what Jesus could do with what the kid was willing to give. I'm going to say that again. Jesus was not concerned with what the kid had. Jesus was concerned with what he could do with what the kid had. See, when the child was willing to come forth and to offer the little bit that he had, Jesus was able to do incredible things. And because those people were able to be fed, they were able to hear Jesus. And like John's whole thing, I don't know if you know this, at the end of the book of John, he says, I wrote all this down so that you would believe. Everything John writes down is to the bent so that the reader would believe. John includes this story. Why? Because the little boy helped thousands of people believe with just a couple of loaves and a couple of fish. You may think that what you have is small. You may not think you have anything at all, but I would guarantee that you do. And I would guarantee that Jesus wants to use that to help other people follow Jesus.